What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Hope you're doing well. So today's episode, I want to get in the mood here. So I'm actually going to crack open a beer, first of all, because my guest today is none other than Ian Mills from Paddles Brewing here in Whitby. Had to drink the right one, right? So it's been sitting in the fridge waiting for this to happen. So Ian, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's, the weather's starting to turn, getting into summertime. It's always good beer drinking weather. So I'm pretty happy that we're here,
Now, I do have to tell our listeners, I am a major craft beer aficionado, and living here out in Whitby, Five Paddles is arguably the best brewery out here. That's not to say anything against the other ones, because there's some really good craft beer in Ontario. But Ian, can you tell us a little bit about Five Paddles?
Well, yeah, Five Paddles was kind of, we were the first open to public brewery in Durham region. We are celebrating our 8th year this past week, which is amazing. I can't believe we've been doing it this long. It kind of started off as a crazy idea amongst 5 friends. We were homebrewers, and we were a part of the Durham Homebrewers Club here in Durham. And when you first make your very first really good beer, from grain to keg or to bottle, you sit there and you go, oh, I'm sure people would pay for this, right? The reality is most of your friends are just there for the free beer. But, one of the guys had an idea of how to open up a small brewery and, not lose your house or lose your wife, which is kind of the most important thing. But we didn't invest a huge amount of money to open up a very small brewery. The hope was that we could eventually quit our day jobs and work there full time. And 8 years later, we're here we are. I've certainly been full time for about 7.5 or 7 3/4 of that time. And we're a real business. We're making beer and we're distributing across our local area, but we're still doing it, which is amazing.
Now let's talk about those early brewing days, those home brewing days. Do you remember what kind of beer it was that you for the first time really sat there and contemplated this is actually turning out really, really good. Maybe we should make a go of this.
Well, you know what? I have a little bit of the, that feeling like I can always be better. And for me, it was constantly fighting to make better beer. Going back to my very first home brews, the story for me was I had bought a homebrew kit for my brother. He was going off to university. He was 19, I was 17. I got my mom and dad to come down with me to the homebrew shop. I grew up in Oshawa, and there's a little place called the Little Winemaker. And they had a sign out front that said, make, 100 bottles of beer for $20 or something like that, right? And I thought, wow, what a great birthday gift for my brother. He's going off to university. He can make his own beer, save some money. And so I bought him this kit, and it turns out that as far as homebrewing goes, you don't have to be 19 to buy homebrew equipment. So that was kind of maybe a bit of a scary revelation at that point when I was 17. But I brought the kit home. I gave it to him. He used it, and we did a couple of batches together. And I fell in love with the idea of now these were these old Cooper's kits where you open up the can and you get the brown goo and you put it in the water, right? I mean, it did the job. It made beer. Well, it made something resembling beer, but the bug got me then, and I was hooked. I couldn't believe that I'd taken water and turned it into, some form of alcohol. It's just such an amazing process. So, I mean, that was, flash forward another almost 20 years. And then I really get into brewing. I'd always kind of, made cider and wine and, anything that you could ferment, I gave it a try. But beer was always there. And then I met these guys at the Durham Homebrewers Club, and we started making, grain from barley and, getting hops and sourcing new ingredients and talking about beer. We were sampling beers from usually internationally, like from the US or from the UK. Domestically, there was not a huge amount of great supply, only because of the LCBO and the beer store. So it's gotten better over the last 8 years, which is great. But then we started entering homebrew competitions, and we all started doing really well. And then it turned into, how do you tweak a recipe to make it just a little bit better, and emphasize this? And we started brewing classic styles. I give my hats off to Jamil Zainasheff. He wrote the book Brewing Classic Styles, and he had a podcast that I would listen to. It was an hour-long podcast, and he talked about one specific style of beer every podcast. So you'd have like a English mild, or you'd have an American pale ale or a lager, and it was 60 minutes talking about that. And then at the end, there was a recipe, and we'd always try and make it. So we started meddling and doing really well. And, it was amazing when you start getting this feedback from these people that have been tasting beer for years, and they're professional beer judges, and they're giving you little, hints and tricks to help you along. And, you start to get some validation, and you start to think, hey, maybe we can make a go of this. Maybe it is good enough. And then, we ended up, started brewing on a bigger scale, not much bigger than a homebrew scale, at about 300 liters at a time, which is only about 15 times larger than what we were doing at home. Which now we're doing, 10 barrels or 1,000 liter batches, and sometimes double batching our beer. But, we thought maybe people would kind of, really enjoy it, because all of our friends did. And it was a very limited market at that point. There was nobody really doing what we were doing. You'd go to a brewery and you'd find 2 or 3 beers that were sold in the LCBO or the beer store, and nothing new. So I would go to a place like Black Oak or Great Lakes Brewery, and I'd say, like, do you have anything else? I've tried all this stuff. And they're like, no, not really. Right. They kind of feel like, why are you even here? Just go to the LCBO. It's easier if you buy from the LCBO. Right. So then, within the first, 3 months of being open, we had brewed more beers, different styles and different names and different kinds of beer than most breweries had in 20 or 30 years. And, but we weren't distributing. We were just selling out the front door. And, when you're standing there and you're staring, I remember the first time we were bottling, and I'm looking at all these bottles of beer, and I'm thinking, how the hell are we going to sell all this stuff? Right. And, within the first opening weekend, we sold everything. We sold like 1,000 bottles of beer, and I couldn't believe it. And we're all high-fiving each other, and we're like, oh my God, now we got to make more. And that's what it was like for the first few years. It was just constantly chasing that, filling the fridge. It was this grinding job to just get beer into the fridge and always have something new, so it was very exciting times. We were the only brewery in Durham, and I think there's 14 now. So it was good. It was very, honeymoon phase for sure.
Now, when you think, probably about 10 years ago, a trip to the beer store would pretty much be, well, what brand of, lager or light lager would you like? The red one or the blue one, Yeah. But now it's pretty much like, you have all these breweries from all over creating all these different styles of beer. So from, those early days to what you're looking at now, how, in your opinion, from being from the inside, has the craft brewery industry in Canada changed?
Oh, it's changed immensely. Like they're at the time, like you said, light lager or a lager, blue or red label kind of thing. The most exciting thing that you could get was probably an import. But, at the time I would go and I'd say I'm doing my tour around the world, and I get my little 8-pack, and I pick up all these different beers from, international beers. And I realized now that it was nothing but either a lager from Poland or a lager from Czech or German lager. It was just it's all really similar beers, but just from different countries. And then now you go into any LCBO or even a beer store, and the craft section is huge. And you can go to any brewery in Ontario right now and do a mini beer festival. They have anywhere from 6 to 20 different beers that you can sample that they make right there. So at one time, it was go straight to whatever the liquor control board, wherever it was. But now you can, within a 15-minute drive or 20-minute drive, hit 4 or 5 breweries. And each one will have so many different offerings, and they're all very unique, and every space is unique. I think it's just fantastic because there's so many people out there doing such cool things. The good thing is that, that people are starting to do this. There is a touring aspect where people will, go out and hit more breweries every weekend. It's become a bit of a culture, right? Like I jokingly say that one of the t-shirts I want to design for this summer, on the back, and I tried to get it out for Father's Day, but I just didn't have the time to make it happen. But next Father's Day I will, to have it on the back and say, don't get me started talking about craft beer. Because inevitably, if anybody goes to a party right now, somebody's like, "Hey, what are you drinking? What's this? Have you tried this beer?" And they're untapping it and they're pulling out their phones and, doing all these crazy things with beer. And it's Garrett Oliver from Brooklyn Brewery in New York called it the winification of beer, and it's true. There's this. You're no longer talking while having a beer. You're talking about beer while having a beer. And it's kind of cool. I used to be so excited about it, and to the point where my wife and my kids were like, "Oh, come on, Dad, you're always talking about beer." But, more and more people are talking about it, which is great. It's a huge segment, and, it's certainly growing. Yeah. And I mean, unbelievably so. In 10 years, it changed that fast.
Now, I do have to ask, because the last year and a half, with everything having to shut down, I mean, as a patron of Five Paddles myself, because I've gone down there, I don't know how many times. And yeah, like you go there and there were always people sitting in the brewery talking about beer. There were sitting areas in the back. There were sitting areas up front. And it was very much a very chill, again, like beer connoisseur vibe kind of thing, where if you wanted to talk, sit, drink, have a couple of flights, talk about beer, you were in the right place. How has the last year and a half been for you guys?
Oh, it's been crazy. I was talking to another brewery owner, and, you say, like, I'm kind of tired of waking up every every morning and trying to figure out how to pivot my business. Right. I'll go through the doom and gloom of what's happened in the last year and a half, So when COVID first hit and we had a big lockdown, it was around March break, and I had gone on holiday with my wife and kids, and we had left and everything was normal. The tap room was open, music, like you said, everybody chill, hanging out, having a pint. And then I came back and the world ran out of toilet paper. It was insane, and the doors were locked, and we had sent everybody home, and we were like, what do we do, right? And luckily, we were very lucky at that point that we were able to pivot very quickly to do direct delivery to your home. So that was a really good allowance. But I haven't filled a keg in a year and a half. And, you figure the bars and the restaurants that have all been affected so heavily by this, and it's a good way to get your beer out there, and it's a good way to sell your product. That just dried up and it's gone. Right. So I've got kegs covered in dust, and I'm looking, and every time I think, oh, I should, fill a keg and maybe I'll fill up a dozen kegs or something, we get another lockdown. And then, I look and I'm like, who dodged a bullet? I didn't, I'm not sitting on, the stale beer. Right. So, it was a huge challenge. And, the great thing, for that first couple of weeks, we were talking very closely with the Ontario Craft Brewers Association, which we're a member of. And thanks to the Scott Simmons, the president, and the executive committee, we were able to really talk to the province and get certain allowances and allow us to keep producing, keep being open, and keep staying, giving, making beer and selling beer in different ways, because it was very bleak. You're looking at it going, okay, I've got, thousands of liters of beer in fermenters, and I might have to shut my doors for an undisclosed amount of time, but still knowing that, maybe is the LCBO going to be open? Is that going to be closed? There was a real kind of fear for quite a while, whether any alcohol sales or any sales at all were going to happen. So, Luckily, with the advocacy of our group, we were able to, deem breweries in Ontario as essential. So we were still able to produce and sell beer. And then, with that, there was a lot of more advocacy to, have certain allowances to be open later, to do delivery, because at one time, the delivery directly to a home was very odd, and it wasn't really kind of set out in stone. And of course, beer is a controlled substance, and it's not just, somebody saying, okay, you can be open. It's actually written into the law books, right? So the way we're controlled is through law. And, the decision does have to come from, the provincial parliament. So, lots of pins and needles and tons of meetings, lots of Zoom meetings like this, which, usually Zoom meetings were kind of like doing a podcast and hanging out. But these were very serious ones, and we were lucky that we were able to start to do patios. The Alcohol and Gaming Commission was making, allowances. All of this thing was great. They really opened it up for us to allow us to continue to stay in business, which, it's not just about, sending out beer and making sure people can still, get drunk on the weekends, but it's also about small businesses still allowed to, stay in business. We didn't really have to lay off too many people for too long. We were able to hire them back fairly quickly, which is really good. I was really happy about that. That was the hardest part, when you go from having a tap room and, you've got weekend staff and evening staff and their family, and you got to look them in the eye and say, hey, listen, I don't know what to do, but, I'm going to have to send you home for now, but as soon as we can, we'll hire you back. Right.
Now, you said you were talking to, some of the local bars and whatnot, the ones that would normally order kegs, because there are some where it's like, yeah, they pride themselves on having a ton of different and locally produced craft beer on tap. What's kind of been their response? Like, I can only imagine, like they're hurting just as much as other small businesses, or maybe even more.
Yeah, I think that they're hurting even more. I honestly, it shocks me to the core what they've had to endure over the last year and a half, because I don't think that I could have floated that by any means. It's just demoralizing to have a Friday night, Maple Leafs game, going, and the bar's full and everybody's drinking and you're making lots of money, and then nothing. You've got two people running a takeout, and maybe selling a couple of cans of beer here and there. I do think about the big guys, like you talk about the Molsons and the Budweiser type thing. These guys, they've got a river of beer going into kegs and going into glasses at these restaurants, and that's done. Like it's over. And so for them, they're like, they do have a bit of deeper pockets, so they can get that river flowing a little bit faster than we would, because I don't have an inside scoop through any government means to find out when we're open, or I get no preparation other than, oh, by the way, you can start serving on a patio Monday, and it takes longer than that to get beer into kegs. But they really took the brunt of it. The good thing is that all of us, certainly in the last 6 to 9 months, have been ready, and you got your hand on the button, and you're like, okay, when can we do this? When can we fill a keg? When can we run it out to you? And as soon as those things are open, it's just boom, the beer starts flowing, which is great. Personally, for us, we really did take a hard step back, because when we did open up back in the summertime last year, back in 2020, I did fill a few kegs and sent them all out. Everybody got shut down again, and I had to buy back a lot of kegs, right? So as a business owner, you're looking at it going like, wow, it's a bit of a gamble here, right? So, but the good thing is that there is a lot of breweries out there, and a lot of them are really ready to go. I think that they've been able to develop some very strong and better relationships with these people. The good thing is that, they are there and they are supporting these small businesses, because we drive around and look at all these restaurants and bars and stuff like that. They're all small businesses too. And there's a guy or a girl at the end of the phone that's like, I just want to stay in business. I want things to go back to normal, but I don't want to get sick. Right. So the response has been really good. For us, we're selling more cans to bars and restaurants than we ever did. It was always draft. But at least for them too, again, the province has allowed them that they can start selling cans to go, which is great. I've always thought that it would be great to be able to own a bar and, be able to sell a couple of cans to go at the end of the night. Cause you're like, okay, well, the Jays game is over, the Blue Jays or the Leafs game's over. I want to go home, but I still want, a couple of beers when I get there, So it's kind of good that those things are allowed. But man, honestly, I think about it and it just breaks my heart knowing what a lot of these people have had to go through. And there's been a lot of closures. There really has. Yeah.
Now you mentioned that earlier that you had been talking to the province, and of course one of the things early on in the current Ford government's policies was a buck of beer. So considering what it takes to actually create a beer and to craft one, what was your initial response when you heard the whole buck of beer thing?
I'm exactly what I'm doing now, right? Like it was so funny and ludicrous, right? Like the buck of beer thing, just alcohol has heavy taxes, that the breweries have to submit prior to anybody getting it. So when you see a price tag on any product that's beer, wine, or liquor, it's significantly taxed, right? Like it's, I get it. It makes sense. It's an easy way to tax. People will, continually drink, and the sin tax that we do here is pretty significant. So yeah, a buck of beer, I look at it because I talk to a lot of people wherever I go, and I look at everything, whether it's like a barbecue sauce or whether, at the fair and somebody's selling popcorn, I look at the packaging too, right? So I go, I know how much taxation goes into beer, but the bottle, the cap, the label, and the box that it goes into, the delivery that it goes out. And I'm looking at it going like, no, this is not sustainable. There's anybody that can do a buck of beer, man, go for it. Like if you want to lose your shirt, be my guest. and honestly, the answer was there, like I feel like he was a bit out of touch when he first came into power. He's got a better understanding of the whole industry now, because three people in all of Ontario, where there's 400 breweries, got on board with a buck of beer, and none of the big guys really did. So it's not like, Coors Light came in and said, all right, we're doing buck of beer again. Or like, I'm trying to remember, Lakeport was one of them. And I remember the Maker a Laker commercials that you used to hear, the buck of beer.
Oh, yeah.
And, none of them jumped on board again. They were just all like, okay, anybody wants to lose their shirt, knock your socks off.
So let's get back to the beer from Five Paddles, because I know, when I go out to grab my, as I like to call it when I go to the LCBO, my beer venture, what do I find on the shelves today kind of thing. Five Paddles has always been one of those places where, there's your signature beer, and we're going to talk about Home Sweet Home, a little bit later there, but there's always something different in the fridge. So where do the ideas for some of these recipes actually come from?
Well, originally we had a very deep recipe book between, there was a number of us, because we were all making beer prior to starting the brewery. So we had some very thick recipe books that we could dig into, but 8 years into it, you do kind of, run out of ideas. But truthfully, a lot of it is just kind of paying attention to what's going on in the industry, and, seeing if we can somehow take something that, people have started to become familiar with and tweak it and add to it, or even just flip it, on its head and take it from this, and sometimes the inspiration just kind of comes from nowhere, right? It's very casual, but then turns into something amazing. Like we a few years ago, we introduced, we were doing a pie series of beer. We thought, wouldn't it be great to do a pie series of beers? And, apple pie.
Which was stupid tasty. I will say that.
Oh yeah. Like, and at first it was like, kind of recognizable beerish type flavors, doing like a key lime pie or lemon meringue pie. Cause, having a lager and lime is not a big, it's not new, or having a lime radler or something like that. But then we did a coconut cream pie and we didn't think anything of it. We thought, we'll give it a try, see if anybody is interested. It's another pie beer, right? And it was a huge hit. And then we made it again and it was another huge hit. And in fact, even to this day, I think, almost 4 years later, it's one of our better selling brands that we have out of everything that we make. So that was a very unexpected reaction to something that, come on, coconut cream pie beer. It just sounds so crazy, right? Like who would drink a beer while eating coconut cream pie? Nobody. Wow. I don't know. Maybe somebody would, but it works, like the coconut is there, the creaminess is there, and it's a little bit sweet beer, and it just somehow works perfectly, right? So sometimes you get that lightning strikes, and then there's other times that you come up with a great idea, and you're like, I remember years ago we came up with this idea of doing a 5 pale ale. So the idea being, 5% alcohol, 500 milliliter package, 5 different hops, 5 different this. It was all 5 because of 5 paddles. And we released it and everybody was like, yeah, it's okay. So, we were planning out a whole year of this is going to be the summer of 5 and everybody's going to love it and all the bars and it just went nowhere. Right. So sometimes you just never know. But yeah, we listen to each other and we listen to the people that work for us. And, every now and then we're like, all right, we need a crazy idea. And, some of the ideas are kind of left on the floor and we kind of move past it. I think the one that the one that I usually bring up is our Dijon Saison idea. So, the Saison being a Belgian style beer and the idea being, a mustard type flavor to it. And we always say the same thing, it's like, if it's kind of out there, you're going to have to prove it to us. Right. And we got some Dijon and we had a Saison beer. We add a little bit of Dijon to the Saison and it tasted awful. It was horrible. So that one we just said, no. We're not even going to even try a small batch of that one.
I do have to bring up one that always caught my attention because you go to different breweries or you go to the LCBO and you see the shelves and you see like the various double and triple hop IPAs. You see the various different flavors as far as sours go, and you see kind of different breweries kind of riffing on the same idea. The Italian Backyard is the only beer that I have ever seen that's used basil as an ingredient. Where did that one come from?
Well, okay, that goes way back to there was Toronto Festival of Beer. Was it? I think it was. Anyways, there was a beer festival in Toronto, and they had a homebrew competition. And one of the owners had. We were beer judges. We had freshly become beer judges at the time. And they asked him to come down and be a guest judge for this homebrew. And the only thing was going to be bragging rights, right? So I do believe that one of the winners actually brewed with us. Oh boy. Okay, I might get this wrong, but I want to say Jordan Saunders, who opened up Napanee Brewing Company. He brewed with us with his winning beer. I could be wrong. I might have got that one wrong. But anyways, the Italian Backyard, he tried a beer and it tasted like there was basil in it. And he actually sent an email to the guy who submitted it. And he goes, what did you do? Did you add basil? Like, this is incredible. It just worked, right? And the guy goes, no, it's just, hops and barley and yeast, it just somehow tasted like basil. He's like, man, that was incredible. And then we did a small batch of it. And it was a huge hit. We ended up going to the LCBO one summer as a summer seasonal and sold a ton of it across Southern Ontario, which was very cool. We do small batches now. I think it's like you said, it's one of the most memorable ones and people ask for it a lot, but it's a very small segment of people nowadays asking for it. At the time, it was crazy. And, we felt like such mavericks that we were doing something so insane. And the idea of just adding, basil to a beer is kind of like, it's kind of boring now. It's a, one ingredient. When you have things that have like Meyer lemon, almond, banana smoothie beers, right? Like there's so many flavors in beers now. And it really was one of the first, herbaceous, flavored beers. It worked. It really did. And I still to this day love it. And we do it every year. It's always nice because now we're bigger. Sometimes the sourcing ingredients is very difficult, but at least with basil, I can still get local ingredients and talk to the local farmers and get it, which is great. It's always important for us to use local when we can. Of course, sometimes like you can't get a local pineapple or mango, so I got to go somewhere else for that, right?
Now, I mentioned earlier, kind of like that signature beer, the Home Sweet Home, which is a honey vanilla wheat, which is really good, especially the retro, which is unfiltered. So if you like unfiltered beer, like that, this is definitely one to go to. But to have that as the beer that almost singularly represents you guys at the LCBO. How important is that to have that signature blend?
Well, it's a kind of a double-edged sword right now because when it came out, it kind of encapsulated who we were, and it was kind of a really good blonde ale that nobody was really expecting. But it's, by today's standards and by our standards at the brewery and the types of beers that we make now, it's actually very, very toned down. It's still one of our best sellers, but it's just, it's not as, forward thinking as we are now. So, the great thing about that beer is it is accessible to anybody. It still has that recognizable beer type flavor, right? Like we do still get a lot of people that come in the brewery and say, do you have any beer flavored beer? Right. Yeah, and I get it, right? Like some of the beers are a little crazy, even like a hopped up IPA, it's so citrusy and it's so, tropical fruit like. People are looking for a beer flavored beer. And of course the Home Sweet Home is there. The story behind that was, we had been making a lot of beers when we first opened up, a lot of, kind of crazy ones. And I had always made a wheat beer at home. I always had it on tap at my house. And I'd found this new ingredient from a maltster out in British Columbia, where they have this honey malt. And I thought, you know what? I'd really love to do a honey beer because my wife had been out to PEI and she had a honey beer there and she said it was delicious. And I was like, okay, well, honey beer. And I got this wheat beer. And I always thought kind of vanilla would be kind of a cool thing to add to a beer, but it never worked for anybody that I'd had it. I was in Niagara Falls at a brew pub and they had a a vanilla cream ale. I thought this is going to be great. It was awful. It was just did not work. Right. But then, it was the May 2-4 and I was sitting around with my brother-in-law and we were having a beer around a fire. And I'm like, honey, wheat. I'd like to do this wheat with, and I was like, which way do I go? And he goes, geez, and just do both. Do a honey wheat beer, right? I was like, oh man, okay, absolutely, you're right, right? So we made it. We had we used real vanilla beans, which at the time were very easy to get, which over the past few years, there's been an awful difficulty getting vanilla beans. At one time, $95 a pound for vanilla beans, and it went up over $500. Like it's just, it's crazy, right? There was some, sort of the in Madagascar, they had lost a whole couple of seasons because of a hurricane that had gone through. So yeah, I should have been in the vanilla selling and reselling business. I would have made a mint if I'd known. But yeah, we released it, and there was a local restaurant called Chatter Paul's. A fantastic restaurant. And they had said to us, we want to have your local beer on tap. They were one of the first places to actually put our beer on tap. And they said, if you keep making this, we will keep buying it. So they kept buying it. So we ended up having to keep making it. And, we would always dedicate a few kegs to them and the rest we'd sell out the front. And I guess the consistency of it just kind of snowballed, and more people, learned to accept it and wanted and started seeking it out. And yeah, it just kind of, when we initially went to the LCBO to do our first kind of beer at the LCBO, they took it and they're like, yeah, no problem. And it's that, wonderful, consistent beer that we continually make and everybody still kind of goes for. And I'll give you a little bit of insider information. That beer, we actually stopped filtering that not too long ago. So none of it is filtered right now. I did love it when we did filter it because it was so crystal clear. It was like, wow, this is what a beer is supposed to look like. But now none of it is filtered because it does taste better when it's unfiltered. You get all those soft kind of Honey Nut Cheerio kind of notes out of it. And I still reach for it. I still have it, in my fridge at all times because, sometimes when I just need a regular, beer, there it is, right?
Now, one of the things that I really like about Five Paddles is the fact that you guys are very collaborative with, some small businesses within the Durham region. There was the Pickering Coffee Company that you guys were working with, and I know you've done some, joint brews with other breweries. How important as a small craft brewery is it to kind of reach out and collaborate with other small local businesses?
You know what, for us, a lot of it is building those relationships, right? Like it's, we know that looking to beer and seeing what other people in beer are doing is important, but it's more important to see what other people are doing with their businesses. So, you when you're working with local chefs or your, local restaurants, you're getting a whole new set of ideas about what beer could be or what any sort of flavors can be. So you start to get much more inspiration from these people. I remember talking to the guys at Treblecock Coffee when we were doing our coffee beers, and they talk about making coffee. For me, I look and go, oh, coffee, you just buy it, you roast it, and you're done, right? And you drink as much of it as you can to get through the day. But for them, there's a science, and they explain to me all of the different things that you do to get certain flavors to come out of it. And I'm like, wow, these guys are talking about coffee like I am about beer. They immediately turned me into a coffee snob, right? So, I mean, believe me, I still drink a lot of cheap coffee to make it through the week, but, I still reach for a really good coffee when I can. And not just like a going through a Starbucks kind of thing, but like getting a really good, light roast, fair trade coffee, right? So yeah, working with these people, they give you a lot of great inspiration, and you build these great relationships with these amazing people. And part of it is you realize they're going through what you're going through a lot of the time. And, it's fantastic because you can kind of push each other into different avenues and give each other, new, fresh ideas. I've always thought that where, if you're only talking to the people that do what you do, you're only going to do what you have done before. And if you can talk to other people who are doing something different and doing it in a different way, then you will start thinking differently and it'll be better, and it's certainly served us well.
Now, beer and music have gone hand in hand for a long time. And one of the cool things that Five Paddles has done in the past is there was one beer, and it was a collaboration with Rory Tayon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right or not, but the beer itself came with a flexible vinyl. How did that collaboration come into play?
Well, Rory is this amazing musician. He was based out of Durham region for a long time. He's now living in Ottawa. And, if to meet Rory, you love him. He's the biggest, most beautiful voice. Oh man, I swear that guy, he's somehow going to be discovered and he's going to be huge. He's just this incredible person. And we would have him come play at the brewery when we could. And one of the guys had said, it's like, we've been having him play here for a long time and he's such a great guy. We said to him once, would you want to make a beer with us? And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love it. He had a new album that was coming out and we thought, oh, this is kind of perfect timing. It'll be the release of his album and then we'll do the release of our beer. We can promote him, he can promote us. It was kind of a very good synergy moment, right? And then one of the guys I had said, it's like, we had always thought about doing something cool with a label. I had originally thought that years ago, if we could do a label for Christmas that was like a storybook, that you could peel off a storybook off the beer and read this, Christmas story. But one of the guys said, how could we possibly get an album onto a bottle, right? And I'd remembered when I was a kid, I'd buy those old guitar magazines and they had that little 45 that you'd peel off and you could play it. It was horrible. It really didn't sound well, but you got a free song and a free 45 in this guitar magazine, right? And I was like, man, if we could only find somebody that does it like that. And then one day, Mike, one of the other owners, came in. He goes, I found a guy, right? And I was like, oh, like, what is this? What, what's going on? And he goes, okay, this is the craziest story. The guy lives in Europe, and what he does is he presses. You send him a musical file and he presses it onto a piece of paper that you can then play on a record. And where it came from was back under communist Russia, when the Iron Curtain was down, there was these people that they had an underground sharing of music, and they took old x-rays and they cut them up and they would press these records into them, and they would share around these records that were pressed on these old x-rays, and they called them bones. So they're sharing around these bones and listening to this illegal music, because first glance you look at it and go, well, it's nothing, it's just garbage, but it's got it's got the music from the West on it, right? So he found this guy that still had this old technology, and yeah, we sent him out some music, and he did his first single, and we put it on one of our beer. We actually did it twice with Rory, so for both of his latest albums, we were able to do it for both of the releases, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's such a cool story. I'll tell you, the labels were crazy expensive, and it was such a pain in the ass to label them and make this beer and do all that. But man, what a great story, right?
Underground Russian music and beer. I'm sold now. But one of the interesting things too, like when you get to talking to people about beer, is you have people that have like very much their type. You have people who are wheat fans, you have sour fans, you have IPA fans, and within those, kind of, for lack of a better term, genres of beer, you get almost like the little subgenres. The IPA people love the sour IPAs, or they love the triple hopped or quadruple hopped IPAs. Do you see kind of a parallel, between, the different types of beer and the subgenres within those types of beer and music, where like you can almost sit there and say, okay, so if IPA were metal, then the wet hopped IPA would very much be like the progressive metal, if you will.
We talk about this honestly weekly. It's amazing that you bring up something like that. The correlations between the consumption of music and the consumption of beer right now is wildly similar. Even just the attitude behind certain breweries, where you've got punk rock breweries that they'll die for their cause, and they don't want to make it big, and they don't want to sell beer because they've got something to prove. Or you've got that big corporate kind of beer that it's like you're listening to music in the dentist's office, right? So there absolutely is these crazy correlations between all of these things, and you kind of see it. And again, these are the great things that you're kind of shocked by some people, because, you get some people that come in and they look like they're going to be, I only drink Bud Light, and, it's the cheap domestic beer that I drink. And they come in and they're like, oh, give me your fruity beer, the blackberry guava sour, and they're like, this is amazing. And you're like, man, you look just like a regular guy. Why, that would drink a cheap beer. What are you doing? Right. And then you've got somebody who comes in and they have that punk rock attitude, and you think, oh, this guy's going to go for all the IPAs. And they're like, no. Do you have something easy drinking? Right. So it's great, because you can never really see what somebody's CD collection or record collection really looks like from what they dress like, right? But yeah, there's absolutely subgenres, and the I don't really know where we fall in there, to be totally honest. It's hard to kind of pigeonhole myself to what sort of subgenre of music that we are, because I think we've changed so much from year to year that, we're certainly not the yacht rock type guys. But yeah, I often think it's like, we're that kind of relaxed, kind of casual, like, come on in, man. We got a cool beer for you, and we got the cool place for you, right?
So if you were to take the different types of beer, wheats, sours, IPAs, lagers, ghosts, the whole works, right? And if you had to assign a genre of music to each type of beer, which ones would go with what? That's such a tough question to ask, right? So, I mean, you look and you go, oh, the light lagers, it's that, the classic rock type idea. I always think about Q107, right? Where it's like that psychedelic Sunday, where it's guys working on the weekend or going up to the cottage.
Certainly the funny thing is I always think the punk rock type attitude would be a very, a sour beer, or, something that's really heavy or a little bit out there. But truthfully, something like punk rock is light lager, right? Like these guys, they drink cheap, crappy beer when they go out to these venues. And one of the guys on staff, Aaron, he's a self-proclaimed punk rocker, and he certainly is when you get to talk to him, and he loves that nostalgia of that cheap, crappy beer, right? So, you could think of it like a working man, but it's always that, like kind of that get it done kind of style. But yeah, I look at I always think about IPAs, and, as far as for musical styles, at one time I thought it was a very progressive type thing, but I really think it's more of that cottage rock. IPAs now are that they're everywhere, and there's so many out there, and so many people like them so much. It is that one that they load up and go to the cottage with the IPAs. I'm trying to think that I can't even think of a good one, like elevator music. I don't even know,
that would be
how
Corona.
Boring can you get?
that is straight up Corona right there.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Although now I do have to ask you, because you do have some people, like you mentioned earlier, that, their weekends are usually spent like going from brewery to brewery kind of thing to sample, like they're beer aficionados. They love the different types of beer, and they love that, okay, I'm going to go this place, here and have this type, and here and have this type. Do you ever wish that there, like a bunch of breweries would get together and have almost like, beer tour shirts with all the breweries kind of listed on the back?
Yeah, we've talked about that. We during right prior to COVID, we'd actually talked about kind of starting a Durham Brewers Alliance, so that we could somehow get a farther reach to get more people into Durham region to try all of the beers in Durham. Set up some sort of a passport. Like the touring T-shirt is such a good idea. There is actually a couple of really, like years ago, there was Vermont has a beer trail pass that you can get. In Maine, they have the same thing. And at the end of, you get 10 stamps from 10 different breweries that are a part of it, and you get a T-shirt that shows that you did the trail. I would love to see something like that. I think it's such a cool idea. The traceability and the tracking of apps on your phone right now is kind of the perfect time for it. It's really easy. There is the beer passport that you can do, where you can subscribe to this beer passport, and you go to each brewery that's a part of it, and you get like one of your first pours you get for a discounted price. And, then you check off that you'd been there. The good thing is again, this is one of those talks that had happened when COVID was shut down, is that coming out and the recovery from COVID is going to include some of these things. There's the province is allocating some money into tourism, and that's where there are going to be some good innovative people that will come out with some great ideas, like getting that tour poster on your back, right?
Okay, I'm gonna put this out there right now. If you had your choice for bands to play a hypothetical 5 Paddles Fest.
Okay.
Given what you guys listen to at the brewery, or the music that you would listen to when you were, initially with doing the Durham Homebrewers Club, which bands would headline 5 Paddles Fest?
Well, if I was to choose it, I'm a huge, Canadian music fan. Unfortunately, a lot of them, it's impossible to get the band back together. But yeah, okay, perfect dream, and I could go back in time and make it happen. You'd have to have Rush. They're a huge influence for me. It was one of my first concerts I ever went to. I loved Rush as a band, but Tragically Hip, these sorts of things. Certainly Canadian rock would be, at the forefront for me anyways, asking for that. I know our Solomon Aaron, he's got a lot of really good local punk bands that he would certainly lean towards. But there certainly has to be a huge chill aspect to it. I always believe that the yeast perform very well making our beer when you have, some Bob Marley or some reggae playing in the background, where it's like, hey, just chill out, do your job, everything's going to be okay, right?
Which of course brings us to the big question of the podcast, because now it's time, Ian. It's time for us to ask, if you had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, "Hi, I'm Ian, I'm from Five Paddles," you would sit there and hand them a mixtape. And on that tape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape, and why are those songs there?
You know what? That's such an amazing question, because to go back in the catalog of, especially if you're an audiophile and you love music, which I do, to go back on a lifetime of catalog, it's so difficult to come up with things. And for me personally, as a brewer, I'm not a musician. So a lot of this was not, on my list. I don't really have a lot of music that would inspire me to be a better musician, because I don't know how to play a musical instrument, and I've got a terrible voice for singing. So, it's such a great concept. And I do remember making mixtapes and playing those in my car. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge to kind of narrow it down, but I've got a few that would certainly explain me as a person. So the first one that I got on my list is the Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. This Pink Floyd The Wall was, when I was a kid, it was the first double album I ever saw. And it was the first tape that I ever bought with my own money. And it was, listening to, maybe it was that, that, hey, teacher, leave those kids alone type idea, where it's like that first sort of, belief of, stick it to the man, where it's like, yeah, nobody's listening to me and I got to do it my own way and you don't understand. Right. So I think that was my first taste of kind of saying like, no, I need to do it my way. And just because the establishment says it needs to be done like this, it doesn't need to be done like that. Right. So that certainly really kind of influenced me at a very, very young age. It was just, even to this day, when I would work on Sundays by myself, we had a turntable set up at the brewery, and I'd always play all four sides of Pink Floyd The Wall. That enormity of a record from beginning to end. It's not, music isn't really consumed that way right now. So to sit down and dedicate a huge amount of time to that, it's just, that was important to me to, even in my, later years as in the last few years, to do that again. It rekindles that idea of sitting down, staring at the stereo and listening to the music between the speakers, So yeah, definitely the Pink Floyd The Wall. Again, I bring up Rush, Xanadu. That song by Rush, I remember listening to that song when I had gone to the Maple Leaf Gardens. If anybody had been to a concert at Maple Leaf Gardens, I was in the gray section. I think we all got nosebleeds because we were so high up. And, seeing Rush playing in their hometown, and then they play such a deep track as Xanadu, and hearing Geddy Lee's voice, it gave me goosebumps. I couldn't believe it, that it was so big, and they were such an epic concert to watch. And I had seen Rush a few times, but yeah, for some reason that song really kind of sticks in my head, right? It was so theatric and so huge, and it kind of has that, bombacity that you kind of want to give that performance, right? Three small guys on a huge stage, filling up, Maple Leaf Gardens with their big voices and big music. It was incredible. And to hear that, and I remember my brother turning to me, he's like, I can't believe they're playing Xanadu. You're always expecting, like 2112 or, any of the YYZ or Tom Sawyer. But yeah, they did all of that. But then they threw in Xanadu. I was like, wow, man, this is super cool. Like every now and then you got to pull out a deep track, right? So another one that's kind of effective for my life is Romeo is Bleeding. By oh shoot, I just lost it there. Crap, it's a Blue Valentine record. Tom Waits, sorry. Yeah, Tom Waits. So I had gone to Sam the Record Man at the Oshawa Center, and there was a Tom Waits cassette in their $3.99 bin. And I had heard about Tom Waits. I was just a teenager and I didn't really know about Tom Waits. And but I was like, you know what, for $4 or $5 I'll buy it. And so this Blue Valentine cassette, I listened to it once and I was like, kind of weird, not really my thing. I think I was about 15 at the time, and then I got a car, and I had a car with a cassette player, and I it was a small car. I couldn't fit a lot of cassettes in there. So I only grabbed a handful. And one of them was this Tom Waits Blue Valentine cassette. And I listened to that. Like back in the day, you would listen to a whole cassette because that's all you had in your car, right? Or a whole CD because that's all you had. And I popped that thing in there, and that stayed in for a whole summer. And I listened to that album over and over and over again. And it kind of encapsulates that, that summer of 1990 where I'm driving around and, listening to this really weird music and, listening to Tom Waits' voice. He always reinvented himself. And, that idea of reinvention was amazing to me because all of his albums were so different. And that song, it was just like so old school, but not like, old school rock. It was old school kind of scat, kind of, Latin-esque. Like it was just so odd, but it over time kind of became a part of, who I was because I listened to it so much. Maybe because I always often wonder what happened if I had grabbed like a Bee Gees tape and that's all I had in my car, right? Who would I be now? But I got a couple more. So long time running by the Tragically Hip. For me, that album again, Tragically Hip as a Canadian, growing up during that era, they were such a huge influence for all of us.
That's Canada's house band right there.
Yeah, it is. And it's amazing to me because the longevity of that band is just incredible. That song in particular is amazing for me because I listened to it. We listened to that for me was that drive home from the cottage. You're sunburnt, you get covered in mosquito bites, you haven't slept in 3 days, you're probably hungover, and you're listening to that song because it's kind of chilling you out and being like, just get home, you'll be okay, right? And then I, not too long ago, just a few years ago, about 20 years later, I'm at the LCBO here, in my hometown town of Port Perry. And I look over and somebody's cranking that song and it's coming out of their window on a Sunday afternoon. And I look over and there's a 20-year-old girl listening to this song. And I thought, wow, this is like generationally, it still works and they're still listening to it, And I thought this is kind of cool that even though this was what I would consider my music, it's still someone else's that's, a generation removed from me and they still get it, and I thought that was really cool that 20-year-olds, they still all kind of feel the same way. And it was kind of comforting for me that, that people don't change too much, even though we look back and go, kids these days, right? And I thought, hey, kids these days are still listening to cool music. So I got two more quick ones. So a couple of years ago when Billie Eilish came out with her album and I was listening to the radio. I mean, who does that anymore, listening to the radio? But I was listening to the radio and the song When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go came on. And I thought, it was kind of one of those times where I'm like, I'm not listening to the radio anymore because nothing's new and nothing's really progressive. And it's all just the same kind of nonsense over and over again. And then I heard this song and it was like, who is this? It was the first time in years that I pulled over and I immediately downloaded the album so that I could listen to it when I got home. And again, this was one of those times where it wasn't a single, it was the whole album, and I was able to listen to it front to back several times. And I couldn't believe that somebody in this day and age could be so original again, because I don't know if you've noticed this with music. It's like every now and then you get in these lulls and you go, it's kind of boring and it's always the same stuff and nothing's new. And then out of nowhere, somebody pops out and they do something amazing. You're like, wow, how did they do that? How did they progress so much? Right. And I find that with beer's doing the same thing. You get that, you get in moments where you're like, it's so boring and it's the same stuff. And it's like, it is what it is. And then all of a sudden one person out of nowhere does something really crazy. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? And it reinvents everything. Right. And that's what I think was with Billie Eilish. She had that pivotal moment where she was able to, really do something new that really changed a lot for music. And with brewing, it's the same thing. There's a lot of breweries that they do something crazy and all of a sudden you're like, what is going on? This isn't what I thought it was, even though I enjoy this. And then it just changes everything again. Right. So it's that it can still happen. So when I get in doubt and I look and I go, oh, beer's getting boring, or, it's like there's nothing really going on, or I'm doing the same old, I go, no. There can still be inspiration out there, and there somebody can do something cool. It might be me, it might be somebody else, but somebody can really change it really, really, significantly, which is really kind of humbling. So I got my last one, and I have to include Leonard Cohen, because I went through a phase when I was a teenager where I was convinced that I was going to move to Greece, drink wine, smoke cigarettes, and write poetry, and of course you eat up Leonard Cohen at that point, right? And he has this song that, it's called Tower of Song. The album itself is so crazily produced. And if you ever get a chance to kind of read into how the production happened on that album, it's really crazy, because he lost control of it. The guy took it away, did all the music for it, brought it back, and he's like, what the hell is this? Right. And then released it without his, approval. And it's like, but that song, there's one line at the beginning of that song that I kind of, was like, wow, this is a cool line when I first heard it as a teenager. But now I'm looking at that with new eyes, and I'm like, wow, this really means something. And the beginning of that song starts off and it says, my friends are gone and my hair is gray, and I ache in the places where I used to play. And I look at that and I go, man, I'm coming on 50. And I that resonates so well with me, right? Where it's like, things change, and everything that I used to do, which used to just kind of give me a little bit of a headache, really hurts right now, And I look and I go, man, but he's still doing it, right? And then proceeded to go on with his career and still keep doing it. But yeah, that one line really, really, encapsulates where I am right now. Now, and that's being said, my friends are still around, which is cool. I get to work with my friends. I still get to see my friends. And, but yeah, my hair is gray, and yeah, I certainly do ache in the places where I used to play. Things aren't as easy as always, but you still persevere. And the good thing is, up here, you still got it. I still feel like a teenager, which is kind of fun.
I'm starting to feel an affinity with that song right now. I don't know. The hair has definitely gone gray. That's for sure. So Ian, thank you so much for this. I do have to ask, what is next for Five Paddles? Because you've had a great run for 8 years. What is next? Where would you like to see Five Paddles go once things can start to open up again, for good?
Yeah, this is the great thing. We talk about this all the time at the brewery, and it's like, where are we going to go? What are we going to do, right? And the world is our oyster at this point, because really, we've kind of weathered the worst storm that you could possibly think about, and we came out the other end, and we're still in business, and we're still doing cool things. The good thing is that with the shutting down that we've had, it has, kind of injected this incredible amount of inspiration and innovation and creativity into beer. We've started doing much more heavy-handed things. A lot of our fruit beers, we're making these smoothie beers now, where we add so much fruit puree into it that it just coats the glass. You have to kind of rock the beer around, and it looks and tastes like a smoothie. These are the things where you're looking back and going, okay, well, we were all just staring at the same four walls, and we needed that, you're staring at gray walls, of a factory for months on end, and we need something bright and exciting at the end of this tunnel. So yeah, I mean, for us, it's just like, we really feel like we got to kind of push that boundary and, push through to see how far we can actually take it. And it's like, again, you think that you've taken it as far as you can by adding basil into a beer, and then you realize, man, that is just your first step and to doing something really incredible. So yeah, the other thing that's really important for us is that the local people really took care of us during this shutdown. And at one time I thought, get beer and send it across Ontario, or send it, I'd like to send a shipping container to, Japan and sell beer there. And I looked at that idea now and I go, no, you can't do that. Everybody locally took care of me. They bought my beer. They supported me when they didn't have to. And, they continually do. And I look and I go, yeah, you know what? We got to do things more local. We got to take care of our local people. We got to take care of our local customers, treat them as good as we can, because man, they kept us alive. If it wasn't for them, I really would have felt it bad. So, it's to be able to do something really cool and really exciting, and to do it locally. Yeah, that's really where we're going to be in the future. It's like, you realize these people helped you, so you got to be there for them, right?
Well, to anyone in the area or even in all of Ontario, who's thinking, hey, you know what? I could go for a new beer. I can, speak from experience that I know it's a really good place. and you should go there. Ian, thank you so much for hopping on the show. Where can we find Five Paddles on social media?
Instagram. I believe we may still have a Twitter. I've always said Twitter's dead, but I think there's a Twitter account. But Instagram, Facebook. We did have a TikTok, but we never used it, so they kind of got rid of it for us. But yeah, Instagram and Facebook, fivepaddlesbrewing.ca. You can reach out there. You can see what we have on our online shop. Local delivery is free. Yeah, it's very cool. The social media absolutely helped us and helped every brewery and business stay in business over the past year and a half. So yeah, follow us on those platforms. We're there.
Ian, best of luck as things start to open up. All the best success. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Made You a Mixtape podcast. If you are listening to us on an audio streaming service, you can watch this entire interview over on YouTube. But if you are watching this on YouTube and watching me drink a beer while doing an interview, congratulations. But you can actually go to any of the audio streaming services and download this entire interview and listen to it on the go. This has been Made You a Mixtape. I'm your host, Jason. We'll see you next time. Take care.